There is a headline and a question that is starting to pop up time and time again for the Kansas City Chiefs as they approach the 2025 season. That question is, should the Kansas City Chiefs be interested in troubled wide receiver, Diontae Johnson? Now, I have something of a nuanced opinion on this. I think that there are positives and negatives, and the Chiefs will have to weigh out which side of that scale is heavier. But I have three sources for this question. Real quick, guys, if you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing that I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. We're coming up on 2 years consecutive of daily uploads. Now, in an article titled "Insider Links Chiefs to Former Ravens Wide Receiver Diontae Johnson, Does It Make Sense for Kansas City?" subtitled "After He Was Waived by the Baltimore Ravens, Diontae Johnson was recently linked to the Kansas City Chiefs by a prominent NFL insider," from Sports Illustrated by Jordan Foote, we get the following. Surprisingly, the answer is yes, according to a prominent NFL insider. Taking to X on Saturday morning, Adam Schefter of ESPN said Johnson is a probable candidate to be claimed on waivers. He name-dropped the reigning Super Bowl champions as possible destination for the one-time Pro Bowler. Former Ravens wide receiver Diontae Johnson is likely to be claimed on waivers per sources, Schefter wrote. Potential landing spots include, but are not limited to, the Chargers and the Chiefs if Johnson even makes it that far on waivers. I think there is a better chance than not that he does when we will back out after these sources and look at some of the things that are going on here. But in advance of this year's trade deadline, here's some of what Joshua Briscoe of Kansas City Chiefs on SI had to say in our discussion about whether the Chiefs should move to add Johnson. The other name that feels plausible is Carolina Panthers wide receiver Diontae Johnson, Briscoe began. You wrote about him in March when it was reported that the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't want to send Johnson to Kansas City. Assuming the Chiefs' interest in Johnson was legitimate at that time, he makes almost as much sense now as he did in the spring. The Chiefs could also, in a high-risk, high-reward gamble, extend the 28-year-old Johnson before he hits free agency after this season. If the team would be willing to trust their past evaluation of Johnson, he could suddenly become part of a trio of Rice and Worthy for the 2025 and 2026 seasons, with Rice and Worthy on team-friendly rookie contracts. To say some things have changed since then would be an understatement. Johnson went for dirt cheap on the trade market, which was puzzling considering he was less than 2 years removed from being a high-production player. Over the next several weeks, he fizzled out in Baltimore after refusing to go in to Week 13's game and ultimately getting suspended for it. His Ravens tenure ended on a sour note with just one catch on 5 targets, 6 yards, and 39 offensive snaps, was far from what anyone expected him to offer. Meanwhile, the Chiefs got Hopkins up to speed and kept working with Worthy on the fly. Now they have Marquise Hollywood Brown coming back for Saturday's game against the Houston Texans with such limited time remaining before the postseason. There's a case to be made that pursuing Johnson right now doesn't make much sense. He'd have to be a good fit, on-field fit, cultural fit, and absorb complicated playbook very quickly to stand a chance of impacting winning football. Now, I wanted to give that article because it's kind of the most complete. It's a little bit older, but it's more complete as far as the entire depth of the Diontae Johnson situation. We also get this: 3 Super Bowl contenders who should gamble on Diontae Johnson. It's a risk, but any contender that brings in Diontae Johnson could have a huge payoff, from fans cited by Winston Wilcox. The number 2 team he lists, Kansas City, has no problem adding wide receiver talent, so signing Diontae Johnson wouldn't be a drastic move. Kansas City already made waves in the wide receiver room when they drafted Xavier Worthy, then traded for DeAndre Hopkins after Rashee Rice went out with season-ending injury. Could they potentially add another? I wouldn't count it out. The Chiefs have an obsession with snagging wide receivers and seeing what they could turn them into. They could look to use Johnson as a utility player and maybe find a role for him to thrive in the postseason. This is kind of what I really wanted to grab this article for. Turning him into a utility player. That is important. And then we get this. Chiefs named top landing spot for disgruntled wide receiver who botched contract year. From Heavy.com. Adding to the wide receiver room will be one of the top priorities for the Kansas City Chiefs this upcoming season, though there won't be a surplus of receiver talent to choose from in the free agent pool. Bleacher Report's Andrew Peters thinks Kansas City would be the ideal destination for veteran Diontae Johnson. The Kansas City Chiefs are back-to-back champions and look capable of winning another this year. But they could still use help in the wide receiver room, Peters wrote on December 16th. The Chiefs got some help mid-season when they traded for DeAndre Hopkins, but he'll be a free agent this offseason and could opt to go somewhere else. Beyond Hopkins, Kansas City's best options are aging Travis Kelce and rookie receiver Xavier Worthy. Rashee Rice, who was Patrick Mahomes' number one option earlier this year, is out for the season. Adding Johnson this offseason would give Mahomes another solid target with plenty of experience as the Chiefs return to an elite offense. Diontae Johnson amidst botched contract year. Johnson, 28, was traded by the team that drafted him, the Pittsburgh Steelers, to the Carolina Panthers in exchange for cornerback Diontae Jackson and a pick swap in March. As the primary option in Carolina's passing game, Johnson registered 30 receptions on 57 targets for 357 yards and 3 touchdowns in 7 games played with the team, according to Pro Football Reference. A change at quarterback, the Panthers benched Bryce Young in favor of Andy Dalton, starting in Week 3, provided a quick but not long-lasting spark for Johnson in terms of production, which left Johnson frustrated for the remainder of his tenure in Carolina. After making his frustrations known publicly regarding how he felt about the floundering Panthers, Johnson was traded to the Baltimore Ravens along with a 6th-round pick in exchange for a 5th-round pick. Johnson began his Ravens tenure by playing 30% of the team's offensive snaps in Week 9, but he played just 8%, 18%, and 9% of the team's offensive snaps over the next 3 weeks, respectively. In Week 13, Johnson was asked by Baltimore's coaching staff to enter the game after fellow wideout Rashad Bateman was injured. But Johnson refused to enter the game, which led to him being suspended in Week 14 for conduct detrimental to the team. He was sidelined for the team's Week 14 win over the New York Giants as a result. On Monday, December 16th, the Ravens announced that the team and Johnson had mutually agreed to excuse him from activities in Week 16. Johnson is in the final year of the 2-year, $36.7 million extension he signed with the Steelers in 2023. Does Diontae Johnson make sense for the wide receiver needy Chiefs? In 2025, the Chiefs are projected to be without receiver Hollywood Brown, a pending free agent, and Rice, whose recovery from a knee injury will likely bleed into the beginning of the 2025 season. Because of that, they could look to free agency to address the wide receiver room before potentially adding to it via the draft. Before this season, an argument could have been made that Johnson was one of the best receivers that will be available in the free agency period of 2025, among the likes of T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, and Amari Cooper. But based on how his 2024 campaign has played out thus far, Johnson has worked his way into a prove-it deal next offseason. He's undoubtedly still a talented player, but his off-the-field antics could prove to be too noisy for many organizations. It's that if that's how the market shapes out for Johnson, then it could be an advantageous situation for the Chiefs. If Johnson winds up receiving modest offers in free agency, one of which could be from Kansas City, then he might opt to choose the Chiefs offer because of their winning traditions. In that scenario, so first off, I just need to break there. If the winning tradition was really that much of a selling point for Diontae Johnson, he wouldn't have raised such a stink with Baltimore. Baltimore doesn't have the Super Bowls that the Kansas City Chiefs have over the past few seasons, but Lamar Jackson wins. Lamar Jackson wins a lot in the regular season, and the case could have easily been made to Diontae Johnson if he were on board that Diontae Johnson could be part of the way that Lamar Jackson ends up winning in the postseason. In that scenario, the two-time defending Super Bowl champions would add a talented pass catcher without having to break the bank. Given his versatility on offense, Johnson would make a lot of sense as a free agency target for the Chiefs in 2025. But the team needs to know for sure that Johnson is someone they can rely on when the going gets tough and when the moment is big if they are going to bring him aboard. According to Spotrac's calculated market value, Johnson is worth a 1-year, $9.5 million contract. I do not see him fetching anywhere near a 1-year, $9.5 million contract. Maybe I'm wrong, but you have to look at what the Kansas City Chiefs did when they brought in Hollywood Brown. They signed him to a 1-year prove-it deal. It was a bargain bin prove-it deal, and guess what? Hollywood Brown had injury concerns and got injured. But you don't blame that on Hollywood Brown. That's just the luck of the draw with a player who has injury concerns. Deontay Johnson is not an injury concern guy. He's a quit on the field concern guy. Now, we're going to get into a little bit about who Deontay Johnson is statistically, who Deontay Johnson is as an athlete, but I'm going to bring it back to this in just a moment. Deontay Johnson, 5'10.5", 183 pounds, with 30 3/4 inch arms, fairly long arms for his height, but not incredibly long arms. A 4.53 40-yard dash, not all that impressive. A fairly quick 1.53 10-yard split. His vertical jump of 33.5 inches is miserable. A 10'3" broad jump is decent. 15 reps is a good number for a guy who's 183 pounds. That is 15 reps with 225 pounds. So athletically, he's really nothing special. What you're looking at is a player who has made a name for himself on the football field. He's not an athletic marvel. He doesn't have all the tools in the world. He's not 6'4". He's not 223 pounds. He doesn't have 34-inch arms. He doesn't have 11-inch hands. He doesn't run a 4.2 40, right? He's none of these things. And he's not elite. So we should put that out there now. But when you look at his numbers, guys, he's a player who can add some fire. In 2019, he had 680 yards and 5 touchdowns off of 59 receptions. That's an 11.5-yard average. That is a upper-level possession receiver type number, right? You're not looking at a deep threat there, but you're not looking at an 8-yard per reception guy. You're looking at 11.5 yards. That's a pretty good number there. 2020, he took that all the way up to 923 yards and 7 touchdowns on 88 receptions. The average came down to 10.5, but you're catching a whole lot more passes. In his third season in the NFL, he broke the 1,000-yard barrier, 1,161 yards with 8 touchdowns. To this point in his career, he looked like a guy that was on trajectory to be elite. He looked like a guy that was on trajectory, 700 yards, 900 yards, almost 1,200 yards, 5 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, 31 first downs, 45 first downs, 59 first downs, 59 receptions, 88 receptions, 107 receptions. He was just growing all over the board. 2022, he took a step back. Maybe that's not entirely his fault. But you're not just looking at the fall from 1,161 yards and 107 receptions down to 86 receptions, 882 yards. He fell off completely in the touchdown department from 8 to 0. From 59 first downs back to 45 first downs. Now, obviously, this can be a secular trend in the offense where he is playing. But it didn't stop there. In the 2024 season, the 2023 season, pardon me, I skipped a year. He declined again to 717 yards on 51 receptions, but he became something of a deep threat with 14.1 yards per reception. He returned to the end zone to the tune of 5 touchdowns, but he was not a dependable guy. Then you had the 2024 mayhem that took place. Started the season with Carolina, that aforementioned 357 yards and 3 touchdowns. For Carolina's offense at that time, that was not bad production. Then he went to Baltimore and had the aforementioned 1 reception on 5 targets for 6 yards. And in Houston, he had 2 receptions on 4 targets for 12 yards. The really concerning part about this, you rarely see a player reclaim it. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is. I don't know if it's because of the utmost amount of focus that it takes to be productive in the NFL, but you basically never see a player return to form after falling off in this fashion. This has been a 3-year decline for Diontae Johnson. We sort of saw that same kind of thing with Juju Smith-Schuster towards the end of his time in Pittsburgh as well, declining a couple years in a row before kind of disappearing. And even when he was at his height in Kansas City, he was not what he had been earlier in his career. And it's easy to say, well, you don't expect that out of an older wide receiver. Juju Smith-Schuster had been in the league for quite some time. He entered the league very young, if you will remember. But he had been around for a while, and, guys fall apart in the NFL. It's just what happens. Diontae Johnson's 28. Deontay Johnson is 28. He's going to be 29 this year. Who's to say that athletically he did not peak in 2021 at 25 years old? Who's to say that with as far as emotional stability are concerned, he did not peak in 2025 in Pittsburgh? You're looking at a guy who has been in the league for a while now. He's got some money. Is that what is motivating / demotivating him? Then you have this. Drop rates through his career actually go down. A little bit of a spike last season, but where is it? The rating when targeted is not all that great. DeAndre Hopkins has several ratings when targeted over 100 in his career. Now, that's DeAndre Hopkins. You're looking at a guy who is a borderline Hall of Famer. I understand that. But he still broke 100 several times. 99.6 is the closest that Diontae Johnson has ever gotten. Last season, a 50.3. A couple seasons back, a 58.8. A career rating when targeted of 82.1. So what is my opinion on should the Kansas City Chiefs bring in Diontae Johnson? Here's where I will start. If it's 1 year, $9.5 million, absolutely not. The Kansas City Chiefs cannot afford to throw that kind of money around on a guy who is not probably, maybe I can't say not probably, there's a high possibility does not end the season with the team because of behavioral issues. On the pro side of that same argument, a guy like Diontae Johnson has to know the chances run out, man. You burned through 3 lives last season. You've burned through 4 in your career. You're not Tyreek Hill. You're not Randy Moss. You're not Jerry Rice. You're a good wide receiver. Burning through 5 lives. I mean, how many? A cat has 7 lives. How many lives as a wide receiver in the NFL have, I don't think I've ever seen one have 7. Even Randy Moss didn't have that type of tumult in his career. I don't remember Randy Moss ever refusing to take the field. Might be wrong on that. I remember him not playing very hard. I remember Randy Moss saying that he blocks when he wants to. I remember Randy Moss not running. I don't remember Randy Moss refusing to take the field. Could be wrong. 1,000% I could be wrong. That is a long time ago. Randy Moss was way better than Diontae Johnson. So the question really is, do we think that Deontay Johnson would be that same type of problem character in Kansas City? We know the Kansas City Chiefs have a very strong locker room. We know that the Kansas City Chiefs were able to foster a problematic type personality like Tyreek Hill. Now, Tyreek Hill, during his time in Kansas City, I think Tyreek Hill throughout his career has been a problematic type personality on track with the team, if that makes any sense. He's the guy who wants to talk a lot of crap, but it's talking crap about how his team's going to win. It's talking crap about how now the Dolphins are better than the Kansas City Chiefs, he'll say. Things like that. It's never been this type of trash coming out of Tyreek Hill's mouth. There are undoubtedly in every locker room across the NFL problematic type characters. Guys who do not get along to get along. Guys who simply don't get it. Right? Can the Chiefs foster that type of personality? Does Diontae Johnson know he might be on his last chance? If you can take both of these situations and answer yes, then it's kind of a no-brainer as long as you don't have to pay upwards of $10 million. As long as you think that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes et al. Can keep Diontae Johnson on the field, and Diontae Johnson knows in the back of his mind, all I have to do is not screw up too bad, and there will be millions more dollars in my bank account by the time football runs out, then yeah. So we saw with Joker a bit of this same type of dynamic, right? He was a guy who seemingly didn't get it. And he had other interests off the football field. I don't know what Diontae Johnson's interests are off of the football field. If he does not have one of these other... So Joker, I had other interests off the football field where he was going to make money and things. If you don't have that alleyway as an off-ramp for your NFL career, or think that you have that alleyway as a potential revenue stream after your NFL career, that alone might be enough to slap you in the face and say, hey, you got to calm down. Probably all of you have been at the point at some point in your life where you almost lost your job. You did something stupid. There was some portion of your job that you didn't quite pay as much attention to as you should have. You were always 5 minutes late. Whatever it is, you've probably almost lost your job at some point. And you reeled it back in. That's real with professional sports. And that age question with Diontae Johnson, that's where this starts to pay positive dividends. In that, he might be old enough to get that now. You're 23, you're 24. You don't understand that. You're 28. Diontae Johnson wakes up in the morning and his knees probably hurt. Got a little bit of a backache. Probably he sees that coming, right? Ultimately, if the Chiefs can get him for less than the contract that they signed Hollywood Brown for, and he is someone with whom Patrick Mahomes has had conversations. I don't know how legal that is with the NFL's rules, whatever. If Patrick Mahomes can give the organization some type of go-ahead, some type of nod, then I think this move makes sense. If you're getting him for $5 million on a one-year prove-it deal, then I think this move makes sense. Basically anything other than that, if there is any risk at all for the Chiefs other than those things that are bundled into his personality, what I mean is if there is financial risk involved, if this is going to be something for which they have to break the bank, then no, don't do this. Because the Chiefs are in a precarious position this year, and they need a couple things to break their way. They really do. They're going to need a Trey Smith type acquisition in the draft where you're looking at the third day and all of a sudden you're drafting a 4-year starter. They're going to need a free agent acquisition to work out for once for Brett Veach. Has not happened for the Kansas City Chiefs, really. I don't know. They're going to need some things to work out. And if this is any risk at all above, well, we can cut him and not lose any money, and he was only costing $5 million anyway. If it's anything other than that, I say no. That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel. So consider hitting the subscribe button to stick around for more. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.